Again, happy Father's Day to all of us dads. You know, one of the best things about Father's Day is that for 24 hours, it must be tolerated that we tell dad jokes. And you have to roll with it. You can roll your eyes all you want. But you have to kind of grin and bear it, grimace and bear it. So with that, my doctor told me I'm at risk for heart disease because I eat too much sodium. I took his advice with a pinch of salt. A guy was trying to sell me a coffin. That's the last thing I need. My grief counselor died. He was so good, I don't even care. Took a moment. Don't worry, I have more. So here's some more biblical ones. Why didn't they play cards on the ark? Noah was always standing on the deck. Who was the smartest man in the Bible? Abraham. He knew a lot. And what kind of man was Boaz before his marriage? Well, he was ruthless. Thank you for those courtesy laughs. That's part of playing along. That's good. You know, the official push for Father's Day began in Spokane, Washington, by Sonora Dodd, who wanted to honor her father, William Jackson Smart, a Civil War veteran and a single parent of 6. And she proposed June 5th, which was his birthday, but the first celebration was held June 19th, 1910. It was in 1916 when President Woodrow Wilson supported the idea after speaking at a Father's Day celebration in Spokane. And 8 years later, President Calvin Coolidge also endorsed it, encouraging states to observe the day but stopped short of issuing a national proclamation. It wasn't until President Lyndon Baines Johnson issued the first presidential proclamation in 1966, designating the third Sunday of June as Father's Day. President Richard Nixon signed it into law in 1972, making Father's Day a permanent national holiday in the United States to be celebrated on the third Sunday of June. The day serves as a time to honor not only biological fathers, but also stepfathers and grandfathers and other paternal influences. Of course, dads aren't always appreciated by their kids. Mark Twain famously said that when he was a boy of 14 years of age, he said, "My father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand being in the same room with the old man." Then he said, "Then I turned 21, and I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years." And it is a funny thing. The older we get, the more we understand and learn and appreciate the wisdom that our fathers have tried to impart to us. I also understand that for some people, Father's Day isn't a good day. They hear the words Father's Day, and because of bad memories of their father, maybe a tense relationship with their dad, that they sort of cringe. And that's understandable if you had an abusive father or an alcoholic father or a father who abandoned you or was harsh and made you feel like you never measured up. Father's Day can be difficult. So what we want to do this morning, I want to bring us into the Word and see what God's desire is for fathers. Now, today's message will speak to parents in general, but to fathers in particular. We're going to look at 2 verses out of Proverbs chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, where we read Solomon speaking this, "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights." Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. He also wrote one of the Psalms. Not all of the Psalms are ascribed to David. One is ascribed to Solomon, the son of David, and that is Psalm 127, in which Solomon says in Psalm 127, verse 3, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward." The New Living Translation puts it this way, "Children are a gift from the Lord." I like that translation. Dads, your kids are a gift from God, but they are not yours to keep. They're yours to rear And those children that you have are not put here to bring you fulfillment. You are here to fulfill God's plan in their lives and to fulfill that. Now, in these two verses, there are three principles that emerge that describe balanced fatherhood. We're going to see a father's instruction. Instruction is what informs a child. It's what equips a child for life by the principles that are laid down. Second, there is the correction that is needed. You must add correction to instruction because it is the correction that will adjust the attitude and the choices that are being made and add strength to their life. And then finally, affection. You need to add love and affection, which brings assurance and stabilization to a child's life. Think of this as like a three-legged stool. You need all three legs standing strong to keep it in balance. And listen, our kids are the only earthly possession that we can take with us to heaven. When you think about how much we can invest in our kids, it is incumbent that we do it correctly then. There were two boys. One boy was told, "You remind me of your father," to which the boy heard that and he just kind of stuck out his tongue in disgust. And then another boy was told, "You remind me of your father too," to which the boy thrust out his chest in pride. And dads, we are the ones who will determine which of those reactions will be experienced by our children. So let's drill down a little bit deeper and begin with, first, a father's instruction. Notice that Proverbs 3 begins with two words, "my son." That's because Solomon, as a father, he's pouring instruction into his son. Let's read the first 4 verses of Proverbs 3. Verse 1, "My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man." And then we go over to the next chapter, Proverbs 4, verse 1. "Hear, my children, the instruction of a father, and give attention to no understanding." And then again, one more chapter over, Proverbs 5, verse 1. "My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Lend your ear to my understanding." And so goes the entire book, because the book of Proverbs is essentially the instruction manual given by a father to train his children. God has given us a whole book in the Bible filled with wisdom on raising kids. That's what the book of Proverbs is. It's instruction for life, and that's why the word son appears 47 times in the book. The word son or sons, 47 times in the book, and the word child or children appears 16 times. Understand, Proverbs isn't a book for philosophers to ponder. It is a book for parents to practice. There's such good practical wisdom given in this book. And it's interesting that even though it's an Old Testament book, it's one of the most read books of the Bible by Christian believers in the world. In fact, if you ever go try just to buy a New Testament Bible, well, they always add in there Proverbs and Psalms. You get a New Testament Bible, you get those two added as well. And some Christians make it a practice to read one proverb a day. There are 31 Proverbs, so read one proverb a day, and you read the whole book of Proverbs in a month. And if you keep doing that cycle, you can read the book of Proverbs 12 times in 1 year and get the wisdom that is in this book. And we know that Solomon was a man of wisdom. The Bible tells us God gave Solomon more wisdom than any other leaders in that area, in that region of the world. He had more wisdom and understanding than all the sand of the seashore. And what did he do with all that wisdom? Well, he wrote books. The Bible tells us he wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. I mean, how amazing would it be to hear one of those songs that he wrote? We don't have any of the music recorded, but we do have the lyrics to one of his songs. It must have been his best song because he called it the Song of Songs. It's called the Song of Solomon. It's the only surviving song we have. But the book of Proverbs is also full of his writings, which are written in Hebrew poetry form to make it memorable. Truth has no value if you don't remember it. And it's written in that way, that style. And one of the great truths about the truth that is found in Proverbs, it is put in such a concise manner, it's like a maxim that you can commit to memory, kind of stored away in your brain, and at the right time, you call it to memory. And at just the right moment, it brings that thought to mind. This, then, is a father's instruction, an instruction manual given to the sons or to the children of Solomon. Now, that's a principle that isn't just found in the Old Testament. It's also found in the New Testament in the book of Ephesians, where it's all about family roles. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, it says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord." Followed by a few verses later in verse 25, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her." Followed by Ephesians 6, verse 1, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord." Followed by this, and listen carefully, Ephesians 6, 4, "And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." Why doesn't Paul write mothers and fathers there? Hey, parents, do this. No, he writes fathers, bring them up. That doesn't mean we sit back and just kind of watch them grow up. It means to move them toward maturity. That's what the phrase "bring them up" means. Move them on toward maturity. Nourish them. And how do we do that? Well, we're given two ways: in the training and admonition of the Lord. Training is instruction. And admonition is like intense instruction. It's in-your-face instruction, and that's an admonishment. And sometimes dads need to do that. Bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And in Hebrew homes, in biblical times, the education of children was primarily done in the first 3 years by the mother as she was nurturing the child. And after the 3rd year, the father would step in and take the role of instruction. If it's a son, it's the father's job to teach his son a trade so he can learn to work with his hands, as well as teaching his son the laws of God, the Torah, teaching him to love Scripture, to memorize it, and to apply it to his life. That's the dad's duty. If it's a daughter, the mother would train the daughter in domestic duties and so forth, but the father was to instruct his children in spiritual matters. And in the Torah, Moses speaks to all the fathers of Israel in Deuteronomy 6, verse 6. He says, "These words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." He's saying that the training of children should be just a natural, normal part of everyday life. Hey, when you get up in the morning, when you sit down for breakfast around the breakfast table, when you start doing things around the house, whatever you're doing, include that training and instruction. So fathers, bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. But what are fathers supposed to bring their children up to be or to do? That's a good question to ask yourself in terms of what your goals are for your children. Do you want them just to go to college, get a college degree? That's your goal? Or make sure they find the right person to marry, that is your goal? Or to have a good career? Those are all well and good, but Paul says, no, you bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. There is to be a spiritual emphasis that's overarching everything. Simply put, lead your kids to Christ. Disciple your kids to follow Christ and show them what it means to be a Christian man or woman. Live that out before them. Charles Spurgeon had a little proverb about this. He said, "Before a child reaches 7, tell him all the way to heaven. And better still, the work will thrive if he learns before he's 5. Dads, share the gospel with your kids. Tell them about Jesus, who he is, why he came. To teach them at a level that they can understand, but instruct them in those things. They aren't too young. Show them what it is to live a life pleasing to God in a world that doesn't want you to live a life pleasing to God. And that will stand out. I want you to listen to this. This is a sad confession of a father after raising his children. He said, "I took my children to school, but not to church. I taught them to drink, but not the living water. I enrolled them in Little League, but not in Sunday school. I showed them how to fish, but not to be fishers of men. I made the Lord's Day a holiday rather than a holy day. Understand, a father is simply a partner with God in making disciples of his children. God wants your children to follow him, to believe in him, to love him, to serve him. And so he put you in their life to show them how you are a partner with God in making disciples of your kids. So this foundational part is instruction that informs and equips. But that leads us to the second ingredient here, a father's correction. Correction is what adjusts behavior, thought patterns, and strengthens the life of the child. In fact, that's really the thrust of this entire passage. Let's read it again, Proverbs 3:11 and 12. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights. Correction is what C.S. Lewis referred to as severe mercy. It's proof that a father loves his child and that he doesn't hate his child. Correction is part of the proof that demonstrates that he really cares. In fact, C.S. Lewis, he gave a great illustration in his book, The Problem of Pain. He said, an artist quickly sketches something for a child, but devotes painstaking energy, effort, and time to a masterpiece born of love. So his conclusion was when we complain about suffering and we're saying, well, God, take this suffering away, we're actually asking God to not love us more, but to love us less. Because God is working a deep and great work, and it's painstaking, and it's troublesome, and it's hard, but as Hebrews 11:6 tells us, the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. So love your kids enough to discipline them, to correct their thinking and their behavior. Now, I know what happens if you step in to discipline. Your child at some point, they're going to say, well, you don't love me. They see that correction as in their mind as proof of that. I've even had parents say, well, my children say I don't love them. And I'll ask, well, how old is your child? Well, 5. Well, I would say that what your child thinks of you at 5 is not nearly as important as what they think of you when they're 25 and they've had a life of instruction and correction poured into them. Correction is proof of love. If you go to a doctor with a broken arm or a broken leg, the doctor will correct or set that limb. If you go to an optometrist for glasses, they're going to give you what is called corrective lenses so that you can see better. There's a story of a set of parents who sent their son to college, and they paid the bill. It wasn't easy for them as they were barely getting by, and they sent money to the university, and it took a lot of sacrifice for them. But they made payment for the first semester only to get an email from their son 1 month later that he sent to the mother, not the father. And the son said, "Dear Mom, I'm writing to inform you that I'm failing all my courses. I had an accident and totally wrecked my car. I owe the clothing store in this town $2,000. And I've been suspended for the next semester because of misconduct. I'm coming home," and then he finishes his email with this, "prepare Dad." And he wrote this to his mom, not his dad, but to the mom, saying, "Mom, prepare Dad." The mom emailed her son back and said, "Dear son, Dad is prepared, prepare yourself." And understand, God is always prepared to deal with his children when we are errant in our behavior. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, he corrects. So dads, get prepared for that part of parenting. Get prepared to meet those challenges, to deal with whatever is dished out, and meet those things with grace, with kindness, but firm discipline. Proverbs 13, verse 24 says, "Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them." Proverbs 19, verse 18, "Chasten your son while there is hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction." Now, these proverbs are not teaching brutality. They're not talking about whacking your kid every time you're in a bad mood. These proverbs teach loving correction to adjust a child's faults while there is still time. But you don't show love by overlooking disobedience and neglecting to discipline. Hall of Fame football coach Tom Landry for the Dallas Cowboys, in an interview a long time ago, he was talking about what it's like to be a coach and what it's like to win game after game after game. And Coach Landry said, the job of a football coach is to make men do what they don't want to do in order to achieve what they've always wanted to be. That's the job of a father in many ways. It's the correction that you add to a child's life that gets them to the place where they can achieve what they've always wanted to be, or better yet, what God wants them to be. Your role is to guide them and coach them in that sense. Now, some people, even in this, I've talked so far about correction or discipline, some people don't get nervous. They get nervous like they don't want to do what's called corporal discipline. Spanking is regarded as primitive and brutal. And there's certainly a wrong way to do it. And likely because of parents doing it the wrong way in previous generations, that the pendulum has swung the opposite direction. But let me state for the record, I believe that the lack of this kind of discipline can emotionally cripple a child. Two sociologists from Harvard University studied this at length, and they wrote a little quip on factors that prevent juvenile delinquency. They gave several factors, but the top two factors that prevent juvenile delinquency are, number one, a father's firm, fair, and consistent discipline. Notice I said firm, fair, and consistent discipline. But number two was the mother's supervision and companionship during the day. Again, I realize this is a sensitive subject, and I'm speaking as a grandparent. And as a grandparent, when my daughter, my oldest daughter, and son-in-law, when they want to discipline or bring correction and to little Luca, and I'm like, well, he didn't do that. It wasn't that bad. You know, he just needs a nap. That's all. That's all he needs. But let me say, there are two types of discipline. There is corrective discipline, and there is preventative discipline. Corrective discipline is physical discipline. That's corporal punishment. This is discipline for a bad attitude or a disobedient action. But then there is preventative discipline, which is preemptive to circumvent such an action. And let me add that corrective discipline must be done in a timely manner. Notice it says to do it while there is still hope, there in Proverbs 19, verse 18. You don't wait till they're 17 years old to decide, I'm going to start spanking my kids. You will have a fight on your hands. You don't begin at 15. You don't begin at 12. You begin in the formative years while they are impressionable. And then something else I want to notice here. The Bible speaks of using a rod to administer discipline. And you're going, what? Yeah, he who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him properly. Now, the word rod, it's mentioned several times in the book of Proverbs, and it brings up all kinds of thoughts and images in our minds as to what that is. But the Hebrew word for rod, it's not a steel rod, it's not a police stick, it's nothing like that. The word shebet, it means a branch or an offshoot. It's something that is flexible, and it's separate from the body. And I believe what this infers here is using a rod is that we never use our hands. I believe my hands are reserved for affirmation, for embrace, for affection. And so spanking or corporal discipline isn't about using your hands or your fist or a headbutt or a kick, but a rod, a flexible instrument that is not part of my body. I want to say my hands for something other than discipline. Now that's corrective discipline, but then there is preventative discipline. And any good doctor knows that you need both in medicine. You need corrective medicine sometimes, but there's also preventative measures you can take so that corrective measures are not necessary. So what is preventative discipline? Playing with your kids, praying with your kids, giving them undivided attention. This is key. When a little child says to you, hey, come here, come look at this, they're inviting you into their world. They want you to be a part of what they're doing. They want that attention. So you walk into a room and you kneel down, you get down on their level, so look them in the eye, and if they have a ball or something, they roll you a ball, and that you sit down, you roll it back and start interacting with your child. That's the most important thing in the world to them at that moment. And then if you get a text message while you're doing that, and you pick up your phone and you start interacting with your screen, all of a sudden, but you're still rolling the ball because you can multitask, right? You think you can. But to that kid, that's sending the message that they are not as important, or other things are more important or equally as important as they are. But when you give them the gift of undivided attention, that is a great gift, and that is preventative discipline. So we have a father's instruction. It informs and equips. A father's correction adjusts and strengthens. Then there's a third ingredient, or this third leg on this stool, a father's affection. Affection assures a child. It settles a child and brings stability. That child is aware of the love that you have for them. Notice again in verse 12, for whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights. That word delights is used in most every Bible translation. It's from the Hebrew word that means to enjoy, to approve, or to favor. But most translations like the word delight. And I like that word too. So instruction informs, correction adjusts, affection stabilizes. And a father's love is central to the emotional well-being of a child. And you're thinking, well, wait, you meant a mother's love, right? That's true as well. But I said a father's love is central to the emotional well-being of a child. In an analysis of over 100 studies on parent-child relationships, it was found that having a loving, nurturing father was as important for a child's happiness, well-being, and social and academic success as having a loving and nurturing mother. In fact, some studies indicated a stronger contributor to the outcome of a child's well-being. So this all brings up a question here. Why is so much responsibility laid on dads in the Bible? And it is. Why does so much get put on dads for instruction, correction, and affection? I'm going to answer this in 3 ways. Number 1, a child's view of God is formed by their father. A child's view of God is formed by their father, first and foremost. If that child becomes a believer in Jesus Christ, that child's going to learn the Lord's Prayer, which begins, Our Father, who art in heaven. And then they're going to read the words of Jesus, your heavenly Father feeds them, he will take care of them. All of the language that speaks of the Father, the Father, the Father. Well, the only father the child has known in his or her earthly life is their earthly father. For good or bad, whether absent or present. So when they hear the word father being associated with God, the flood of memories of their earthly father just comes to their minds. And it may need to be corrected and adjusted or refined. I know mine was. I discovered that there's only one perfect father, and that's God. But a child's view of God is formed by his or her earthly father. That's number 1. Number 2, there's a second reason. Your daughter is going to grow up and marry a man one day. She needs to know what to look for in a young man. Dads provide that model. And it's interesting that even subconsciously, girls will often choose mates that are much like their father. Very similar to their earthly fathers. Again, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. But it's something to keep in mind if you have daughters. And the third reason, your son is going to grow up and marry a woman. He needs to know what kind of a man he is supposed to be. He needs to know what a real man of God looks like. And you are setting that standard. The dads are setting that standard. There's a widely accepted principle in child development literature that says that boys look for their father's approval in everything they do, while girls will look for men from whom the patterns, will look for men from the patterns set by their father. So it is true that it's easier to prepare a boy than repair a man. It's also easier to prepare a woman than repair a woman. And we've all met people with broken lives, in many cases broken from their upbringing. Maybe to some degree that is you as well, as you're working through some of those things. But from a parental point of view, 50 years from now, it's not going to matter what cool car you drive. 50 years from now, it won't matter how much money you have in your bank account or what kind of house you live in. But 50 years from now, it could make a huge difference. The world could be a better place because of the children under your care, the children that you have poured into and that you have raised. Dads, a father's instruction informs and equips. A father's correction adjusts and strengthens. A father's affection assures and stabilizes, and it delights in their children. This is a well-rounded, balanced approach to fatherhood. We need all three. If we're only good at one or two and we miss the other one, well, that's going to be a skewed perspective that the child learns as they grow up. And granted, we're all better at some of these than others, but it's something for us to be paying attention to and to shore up areas of our parenting in that respect. And just as a father, just as a faithful father instructs, corrects, and delights in his child, so God relates to us through Jesus Christ. In our failure, in our sin, God doesn't abandon us. He corrects us, not to condemn us, but to shape us. This loving correction is ultimately fulfilled at the cross, where Jesus bore our guilt and rose to give us new life. The gospel assures that we are not just disciplined, but we are delighted in. God delights in us. And for those who have given their lives to him, we've been adopted by the perfect Father who is committed to forming us into Christ's likeness. Earthly fathers, then, are called to model this gospel, to lead their children not merely by rules, but by grace, truth, and love that is rooted in the Father heart of God. Let's bow our heads in prayer together.